Hello friends, I'm Gio, and welcome to my channel. It's time to sit back, put your feet up, and enjoy. My little channel is all about men falling in love, and in this case, it's love between Ian, a pilot, and Rias, a tech. Welcome to The Dark. In our last chapter, Ian, Elias, and Gutierrez had made an extended trip to track down a drone. Upon returning, Ian learned that Rias was in medical and not doing well. This chapter starts the second the other chapter ends. Chapter 23. South Dome. Medical. Ian. The last time I had seen Rias, he had been by the gate to Shuttle 2, leaning on his crutch while holding his datapad, pale but seemingly stronger, smiling, waving, happy. His kiss promised more when I got back. 6 weeks passed. He stood on the damaged viewport of the audiobook, a stranger who saved my life by sacrificing his own. Was it only days ago he lay in bed next to me, shyly smiling as he told me he loved me, and I gently stroked his cheek before I let him snuggle into me. Every time he had a project, he always stopped whatever he was doing to smile at me. Everybody said he was a hard man to like, but not for me. I loved him. I loved watching him create, or fix, or rebuild. There was a joy that came across his face as he concentrated, or created, or imagined. My cybernetic arm twitched. I watched him make my beautiful, amazing arm on the floor of medical out of spare parts in Doc's shiny cart. I had never known such kindness in all the places I had been. Maybe that's why I fell in love with him. And now I stood at the doorway, and my skin crawled as the horror sank into my stomach. Rias, oh Lord, what have they done to you? The room was dark, not night mode dim, but dark. Except for the occasional monitor blipping lights, the only light was a soft glow around Rias that brought tears. What did they do to you? I whispered, and stepped closer to my lover. Rias, can you hear me? His face didn't have the joy he radiated when he built something. Why couldn't I have gotten back sooner? Rias floated in a null-grav field, chest facing down, crumpled and lifeless. Only the slow hiss of the ventilator breathing for him made his chest move. Someone had the kindness to tie a towel around his waist. 3 pulsing electrodes stuck out from his back, one at the base of his spine, one in the middle, the other just below his skull, each with a long flashing cord attached to the ceiling. They had sliced through the skin on his entire spine and fastened it back together with thick, ugly staples like a long zipper. His back was splattered with bruises and made shiny with some kind of cream, and it smelled of disinfectant. Every bone in his body, including each rib, spinal joint, hand, finger, foot, and toe joint, had a small incision with 2 tubes emerging from each small wound. Most came from his spine and ribs. A human body has more than 200 bones. That means more than 400 tubes stretched from every part of his body to ceiling, to floor, to special panels behind him, like a giant set of wings. He wore a custom ventilator, its tube plugged into the wall, and his chest gently moved as it inhaled and exhaled for him. A readout indicated that it processed the air, so he had a precise mixture of oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide. It wasn't the normal readings I had seen on board the audiobook. They kept Rias oxygen-rich. Captain never kept settings like that. On both arms were nanite cuffs, bubbling as they pumped in sparkling blue nanite gel. Not by the half-liter, like in medical, but non-stop. It wasn't a month's Nuestran revenue going into him. It was a year's, at least. His leg had the blood cuff. It didn't have red and blue blood flowing through it, but clear artificial blood. He had the usual assortment of IVs in his arms and sensors all over his body. I swallowed, forcing my fists to relax. What had they done to my lover? I ran to him as fast as I could and reached into the field and took his hand. It was cold. What happened to you? The subtle motion rotated him until he floated vertical, and the ugliness of what they had done to his back was out of sight. I kicked my shoes off and dropped whatever I was carrying and stepped into the field, pushing myself off the floor until I was floating next to Rias. I lifted his head to look at his face, and his body rotated. He had a brand new tattoo under his left collarbone that said Ian, with a rose curving through the letters, but it was marred with 2 tubes jutting out from his collarbone. Very carefully, I eased my hand through the tubes until I touched his face. Rias, I'm here. His eyes opened. Oh my God, he's awake. I shivered and a violent chill went through my body. They did this to him, and he was conscious? It took a moment for his eyes to focus, and he squeezed his eyes shut against the dim light. I think he tried to say something, but the ventilator prevented him. Don't talk. I'm here. I'm back. I tried to hold him, but there were too damn many tubes. Somebody took a sharp breath behind me. Carruthers, I think, and she softly said, Damn. Somebody else sobbed. Oh my God. Captain Rohan this time. Does it hurt? I whispered. He shook his head, or tried to. I maneuvered my hand through the tubes to trace the tattoo. It's beautiful. Raphaela's work? If he tried to smile, the ventilator mask kept me from seeing it. It goes down your throat, doesn't it? I whispered. He nodded. I'll put it back if you have trouble breathing, I whispered. I undid the ventilator and eased it out of his throat and kissed him. He tasted of plastic and antiseptic. Rias tried to hold me, but the tubes kept his arms from moving. So I held him to me, tight. I'm here, I whispered. The door behind me opened again, and several more footsteps ran in. You must be Ian, said a man with a tired, sad voice. I'm Dr. Tanaka, and I think Rias is our finest surgery to date. I didn't turn around, but with the way I felt, I could have punched him. I ignored the tubes, the ventilator, the cuffs, and squashed Rias to me. He tried to hold me as much as his arms could. We compromised and held hands. His grip was strong and desperate. He wouldn't let me go. What did you do to my boyfriend? I asked. Dr. Tanaka stepped into my field of vision. A small man, short white hair, very tight skin. I would place him about 70. We are very proud of how much we accomplished in such a short time, but it pains me to say it's not working. Why all this? I asked. His conditioning was worsening. Dr. Tanaka kicked off his shoes and stepped into the field and floated by us. Don't blame us for what happened to him. We were trying to save him, but I don't know why it's not working. Dr. Tanaka placed one hand on my shoulder and one on Rias. I'm sorry you had to discover Rias like this. I wish to prepare you first. Let me explain what we were attempting. We have attached a custom industrial-level nanite implant tasked with building a new marrow to his lower spine. Mid-spine, we have attached a specialized AI module to monitor and control the nanites. Just below his skull, we've implanted a second nanite implant, because we didn't think one would do the job. Ria's eyes must have adjusted because his eyes were pleading. I didn't know what they were pleading for. I gently squeezed his hand. I'm here. I'll watch over you. Dr. Tanaka continued, his voice very calm. A defeated man. Each tube carries the nutrient gel directly to the interior of a bone, and we're flooding his body with fresh nanites to remove the dead tissue and build the new structure. It should already have started. His body should become its own artificial blood factory. But it's not. I'm sorry. With a nod from Dr. Tanaka, the room lights came up. Pictures, x-rays, charts, all about Rias were on every wall and every monitor. One picture haunted me. Rias, lying face down on the surgical bunk, the skin and muscles on his back peeled away from his spine as the specialists worked on inserting the nanomodule in the lower vertebra. His blood-stained bunk had some type of surgical arm above it and some of the highest tech consoles I had ever seen. That must have been the last of his normal blood. He couldn't make any more. We woke Rias from the induced coma just a little while ago to check for any kind of brain damage or nerve damage, and I'm happy to say we couldn't find any. That's the good news. We should have seen some kind of progress, but there isn't any. The nanites circulate in his blood, but do nothing. Rias's eyes widened, and he moved his jaw a little. I think he was trying to tell me something. I love you too, I said, stroking his cheek. Do you feel any of this? No, he doesn't. We have placed a nerve inhibitor field on him and are projecting a sterile environment, Dr. Tanaka said. I'm sorry I wasn't here, I said to Rias. I hugged him, gently touching the staples along his back. I shivered. Ian, Rias needs to sleep, and I suspect you do as well, Captain Rohan said. I'm not leaving him again, I said. Where's his datapad? That won't help him. Dr. Tanaka floated to the edge of the field and stepped out. There's only one person in the room who's smart enough to fix this, I said. No offense, Dr. Tanaka, it's not you. Bring me Rias's datapad and clear the room. We need to get to work. He needs to get to work, and we can't afford any disruptions. Dr. Tanaka walked over to the cupboard, opened it, and walked back to us with the datapad. The finest minds in our department have worked on this. I don't know what either of you can do. You've never met my boyfriend, I said. Why does everybody keep underestimating Rias? Rias had made a nice datapad. Bright, shiny, thicker and heavier than his old one. I wonder what he put in it. That's interesting. Rias had designed this datapad with data jacks. Perfect for what I had in mind. I tugged the first input lead out of the ceiling and it fell into my hand. Don't touch those, Dr. Tanaka yelled. Your methods aren't working, I said, and connected the input lead to the datapad. Then I did the same with the other two input leads. Go get something to eat and let me save the man I love. Those are custom-built industrial nanites. The theory behind them is more advanced than anyone on this colony can comprehend, Dr. Tanaka yelled. You've never met Rias, I said. Captain, we need time alone. Please see that we get it. And Carruthers, we need lots of chocolate chip cookies, and I bet Rias needs something cold for his throat. Cookies and smoothies. I'll get some for me and Rohan too, Carruthers said. Dr. Tanaka, you've tried your way, Rohan said. Why don't you and your team take a break? Maybe Rias knows a couple of tricks. They left us alone, and I rubbed his arm. Rias, I'm here. You always liked hard projects. Now you've got the biggest one of your life. Together, we're going to make this work, I said, making sure the input leads were tight in his datapad. Rias's voice was a soft croak, but his datapad understood him. The room shifted and became a starfield. I held Rias and we danced, a man with the cybernetic work of art for an arm and my angel with the electronic wings. We kissed again, and then I whispered, Datapad, sync with my arm, with the AI units on Rias' spine. Any AIs in range. Use Madre even. Let's get this done right. South Dome, Medical. Rias. Was I hallucinating? Ian was here, holding me. We floated in the stars. If this was a dream, I didn't want it to end. I'm here. I love you. I'm not going anywhere, he whispered. Nobody else can fix your marrow, so you have to do it. I'll hold you while you tell your dad about what to do. A hallucination. Ian would have left with Captain Rohan a long time ago. His leaving hurt, and I wanted to sit on the tram and ride for weeks and just feel the pain. Ian had kept me alive, had been my reason for going on. I needed him, now, but he was gone. Only a hallucination remained, but it was the best thing I could hope for. I remembered the times we had laughed, or he had taken me to medical, or the time he held me out by my father's grave marker, or the times I had woken next to him. I loved him. But the hallucination was right. I had to fix myself. Thanks to Dr. Tanaka, my body was filled with everything I needed to rebuild me. I had 7 mid-range AI processors at my command, plus all the information inside Madre and the computational ability of the Adishachar. Before I began, I wanted to send a message to the man I loved. Madre, I want to send a message to Ian. Can you cue it up so he gets it when he's back on Nuestra? I couldn't understand the creaks and croaks my voice made, but my datapad and Madre did. Affirmative, Madre said. Ian, I love you, and I wish, I said. A datapad on the floor said, Ian, I love you, and I wish. I'm with you, the hallucination whispered. Could Ian still be here? Ian, I said. I'm not leaving, he said. He was next to me. Ian wasn't a hallucination. Ian held me. He was real. Ian kissed me and somehow gave me the strength to carry on. What I imagined the nanites could build. This was a dream, right? I dreamed the impossible. I saw ways of improving me. I kissed Ian as we floated among the stars. I studied the plans Dr. Tanaka had made. They were good plans. The concept seemed simple, though constructing what he had designed in such a small space would be a challenge. However, the nanites didn't work. They floated throughout my body, doing nothing. The hallucination kissed me, his fingers intertwining with mine, and whispered, Show them how good you are. It was Ian. My love was here. How? I whispered. Finding the drone took longer than anyone thought, he said. You saved my life. Let me save yours. Use my arm. Use whatever you need. I will love you forever. He placed a finger over my lips so I wouldn't talk. Just know, I will always be here for you. I moved my fingers and creaked out my instructions. The hollow field evolved into 3-dimensional constructs of Dr. Tanaka's plans, simple in the execution and difficult to achieve. I reviewed Dr. Tanaka's plans, his studies, the specs of his AI modules, the customized nanite implant. Good thing I had help. Madre had all the extra memory now that Tristan's shadow partition was gone, and the Adishachar had all the processing power of a starship. My new medical AI modules Doc had given me were swift and precise. The AI in Ian's arm was an old friend, as was the surviving AI from my old datapad. Time to get to work. I overrid the internal AIs Dr. Tanaka and his team had inserted and transferred the task to my datapad. My datapad took over the nanite feeds, the input feeds, and adapted them to what I needed, while the Adishachar AI and Madre made the plans work. Time drifted as I worked, and Ian placed a straw in my mouth, a mango smoothie. Its coldness soothed my throat. I shifted the hollow field until it showed the interior of my spine. Rias is doing all that? Carruthers said. How? Later, Ian said. We've got work. My datapad was sensitive enough that it could decipher me when I croaked or follow my hand motions, even though I could barely move. Datapad, sync with the nanite implants and give me an internal view. We need to find out why they aren't working, I said. I shifted view, focusing on the implants, and I directed the nanites with the wave of a finger, once again maneuvering the holofield like I was directing a symphony. South Dome. Medical. Ian. Rias closed his eyes, but he didn't sleep. Somehow, he knew what to do, and did it. He mumbled constantly, and occasionally he mentioned one AI or another. From the holofield, he directed nanites like a general in an army, and rebuilt himself. At one side of the massive display, he had icons floating, one for each AI in the network. The door opened, and Dr. Tanaka walked in. He looked at the holofield, at the flow of nanites, the way information traveled, at the soft motions Rias used to direct the flow, and he sat down and watched. While I disturb you, I need to talk to Emilio, I whispered. A display window opened in the holofield, and a second later, Emilio answered. He was in CNC, with mouth slightly open and brows furrowed. Val stood behind him. It's up to 30%. Ian, what is going on over there? Emilio asked. Rias is rebuilding himself, I said. He's repurposed nearly a third of Madre, Val said, coming on screen. We have systems all over the 5 domes fluctuating. The Adi Shachar AI is pulling in power like it was in a ship ready to take off. Just let him work, I said. This is his last chance to do what nobody else could do. That's not why I'm calling. Emilio, I think Doc is the other traitor. He somehow realized that the medical emergency on the Smiling Mines was fake. I believe it was intended to get him out of the dome so they could kill him. Instead, he sent Elias, me, and Gutierrez so they would destroy us. Elias told me about that before he went to North Dome. I sent the missiles you captured to the manufacturing dome so they could make more and design launching platforms, Emilio said. The drone? I asked. We brought it to a lab in Central Dome, and I have techs going over it, Emilio said. Rias will be sorry he missed that one, I said. We're already looking for Doc. According to Elias, he's supposed to be at medical tending Drendon and looking after Chef, but we can't find him. And with Madre now working, that's impossible, Emilio said. If he shows up here, I'll call you, I said. Rias had changed. The color had come back into his skin. His fingers moved with more dexterity, and I could understand his words. If I understood the hollow images correctly, he was rebuilding the marrow in his vertebrae and gotten his internal AI modules working. Rias would be fine. He only needed time and someone to protect him. I still held him. Somehow, I would give him my strength so he could continue. I don't want to look, said a tiny voice from the door. Dalila. You have to be strong. Rias needs your help, Rafaela said. They both walked into the holofield, passing through vertebra and swarms of nanites. How is he? Rafaela asked. You know Rias. Give him something to build and he's fine, I whispered. Rias, I brought cookies and a cheeseburger burrito, Dalila whispered. Thank you, Rias said, and the internal schematics of his eye appeared. I'll make sure he eats, I whispered. Get to school so you can be as smart as your brother, okay? He's going to be fine. I'll make sure of it. I fed Rias the cookies, but that's all he would eat. I ate the odd burrito. It had French fries? It was definitely a burrito designed by an 8-year-old. For the next 8 hours, I held my love as he worked on himself. Finally, he closed his eyes, and the holofield returned to a star field as he drowsed on my shoulder. Captain Rowan and Carruthers peeked in, and Gutierrez did as well. We're going to the food court. Do you need anything? Another smoothie, I said. We were left alone. "I will love you forever," I whispered. Rias woke, and we kissed and held each other. Rias cried, "I thought I'd lost you. When is your captain taking you?" "If it's okay with Emilio, and with you, I want to stay here," I said. "Dadapad, make a gold ring." A gold ring made of light appeared in the air, and I held Rias's left hand out, in spite of all the tubes. "Dadapad, adjust size and project it around Rias's ring finger," I said. The ring moved through the air and shrunk. If Rias held his hand still, it looked like he was wearing it. "You mean?" Rias said. "As soon as you get out of medical," I said, "or we can wait a month and have a big party." We danced and shared, and suddenly Rias whispered, "Thank you." I pulled Rias close and whispered, "We'll invite everyone." I started to say, but Rias drifted to sleep in my arms. I think he was happy. "Dadapad, show me the logs of the Adi-Shachar that Shuttle 2 recovered," I said. But before I could watch them, the stress of the last few days, holding my love and knowing he was safe, caught up to me. I slept while all the AI serenaded us. The Adi-Shachar was an old voice, while Madre was a soft voice, and all the other AIs sang like a choir. The new AIs inside Rias sang in high voices. I must be hallucinating because I understood their song. It was beautiful, magical, and not human. I joined in their song as Rias slept, while I held my lover. The AIs did their work. I stared at the beautiful face before me, the same face I had seen out of the viewport 6 weeks ago. Emilio called. He was still at CNC. "How's Rias?" "Asleep. You know, there was something I just realized," I said. "Oh?" he said. "You guys always get mad at him because he doesn't ask permission, and sometimes he screws up. But do you have another person in this colony who is willing to drop everything to help someone?" I said, cuddling Rias on my shoulder. "Asleep? I hope he finally found peace. I think that's Rias's real problem. He cares too much." Emilio took a deep breath, and in the slight shift in light, the redness in his eyes showed. "You could be right. I guess building and repairing is how he takes care of everybody. We take what he does for granted, don't we? He's pretty amazing." "You should know," I whispered, and held Rias's hand up. The datapad still projected the glowing gold ring about Rias's hand. I proposed, and Rias said yes. "Good news and congratulations," Emilio said. "We still haven't found Doc, and I've reviewed the logs. I want to talk to you about them, but I think it will wait until morning. I'll come by first thing to check on him." I held Rias's hand on my shoulder, glad I had survived. This one moment made all the fear and pain worthwhile. Rias trusted me to watch over him. "I'm not leaving," I whispered, even though Rias would never hear me. "Datapad, take us to the stars, so we can dance forever," I said. The scene shifted to a star field, and Rias stirred. "Who said you could never see the stars?" I whispered, as we flew through space to the gurgling of the nanite gel being fed into his body. We slept like that until midnight. An explosion. The sound of air rushing outside. The feel as the wind picked up in this room. A clang, and the rushing wind stopped. "Warning," Rias's datapad and my datapad said at the same time. "Connections with other AIs terminated. Power to medical terminated. Power to South Dome terminated. Connection with communications terminated. Alert. Atmospheric decompression in process. All personnel report to emergency shelters." The lights darkened. Even the emergency lights shut down. The power failed. The null field suspending us collapsed, and we fell, The tubes made an odd squishing noise as they ripped in half, but they slowed Rias's fall enough so I fell underneath him. I landed on my feet as nanite gel squirted over my body. Somehow, in the darkness, I caught Rias. He seemed like he only weighed a dozen kilograms. The gravity was off. "Datapad, lights," I screamed, and held my love close. Was he breathing? I couldn't tell. Both datapads lit up. Mine said, "Error. Medical connection is no longer working." I grabbed his wrist and held it a second. I didn't feel a pulse. I hesitated, unsure what to do. Rias had changed my life, and I wanted to spend every moment with him. Had his heart shut down? Did the artificial blood flow through his veins? I won't take that chance. "Rias, don't give up," I yelled. I placed my mouth on the cold lips that tasted like plastic and began breathing for him. 5 breaths in. Then I pressed my hands on his cold chest and pumped 5 times. "Datapad, I need help," I screamed. Thank you for joining me, my friends. Until next time, peace.